The main road is called Broughton Lane. Local folklore says it takes its name from Spence Broton, a notorious 18th century outlaw. For 36 long years, a dark shadow loomed over this very spot, where his remains were locked inside a bleak iron structure, left swinging silently in the sky as a chilling warning to all who passed by. It all began with a robbery in early 1791. The news officially broke to the local community, later through a shocking announcement. The public found out the robbery was over a single piece of paper, a French bill of exchange worth £123, a fortune worth roughly £24,000 in today's money. Broughton was a farmer's son who threw his future away in reckless gambling dens and the intense underground world of prize wager pits and bird fighting rings. Desperate to recoup his fortune, he ambushed a local mail carrier, a young boy named George Loxley, under the cover of darkness. George was blindfolded with a handkerchief and was left tied to a freezing hedge in the middle of the night. The investigation was relentless. Spence fled south to hide in the crowded streets of London. John Townsend, the most celebrated investigator of the era, tracked him down. When Townsend cornered him, Spence's time on the run was over. To make matters worse, his own associates turned on him. To seal Broughton's fate, a man named Shaw pointed the blame squarely at Spence to protect his own future. Meanwhile, another witness named John Close testified that he ran into Broughton on the streets of London. On Saturday 14th April 1792, claiming he was a murdered man. Surely I have greatly transgressed the laws both of God and man. In what manner shall a sinful wretch like me presume to approach the throne of mercy? Alas, my repeated provocations do now wound me to the very soul. Standing before a massive staring crowd, his final words completely changed. He loudly protested his innocence. Broughton admitted that he had travelled to Rotherham with the full intention of intercepting the mail coach, but he swore he was actually 6 miles away from the spot when the incident took place. His trial in York didn't take long at all. It lasted exactly 90 minutes. Mr. Justice Buller, a man notoriously ruthless, he earned the dark nickname Hanging Bully. He didn't want just a standard legal outcome. He wanted Spence's physical form to decay out in public. The court decided his physical form wasn't even allowed a proper resting place. To quote the presiding judge, Mr. Justice Buller, his remains were ordered to be suspended betwixt heaven and earth, as unworthy of either, to be buffeted about by the winds and storms. Despite his last-minute pleas, the sentence was carried out. Broughton met the noose, and his time was over. Spence's associate, John Oxley, managed to break away from the law in London, but met a grim fate. Hunger took him in the freezing cold, alone in a bleak barn on the Loxley Moor. Spence's measurements for his iron enclosure were taken before he even walked out of the courtroom. His remains were immediately packed into a cart and driven all the way back to Sheffield to face the ultimate penalty. He was hanged in chains. The chains were used because the standard rope would quickly rot away in the weather, whereas heavy iron chains ensured the body stayed hung up for years as a permanent warning. 2 days later, when they hoisted his iron enclosure up into the sky, 40,000 people turned up to watch. It wasn't a sad or serious occasion. It was treated like a massive street carnival. Local schools actually closed down for the day so teachers could walk groups of school children out to look at the Attercliffe Idol. Back in the 18th century, calling something an idol didn't mean a celebrity. It meant a physical object that people became strangely obsessed with. The name was a dark Sheffield joke about how the whole town become fixated on the grim landmark, turning a stark warning into a massive local spectacle. They just left him out in the open, completely exposed, to be battered by freezing Sheffield storms until there was nothing left but a hollow rattle in the wind. He remained above the common for 36 years. The open air was his only resting place now. Think about that for a second. Entire generations grew up walking past him. People used the landmark to give directions, saying things like, "Turn left at the skeleton." The local pub owner at the Arrow made a small fortune selling food and drinks to crowds and curious tourists. The real mystery isn't just why they put him up there, it's why the town refused to take him down for nearly 40 years. If you travel down Broughton Lane today, you'll find the Noose Gibbet Inn, a modern pub built around 60 yards from where the 14-foot timber post was first hammered into the earth. Over time, people stopped staring at the landmark and started hunting for souvenirs. Back then, Attercliffe was transforming into a massive smoky industrial hub packed with pottery workshops and brickworks. The individuals working these fiery kilns were resilient, hardened workers. After a few too many drinks, that enclosure stopped being a warning and turned into a target. Potters would throw stones at it just to see if they could knock a piece of history loose. Local legend says they pelted the structure until fragments actually dropped into the mud below. They didn't see a person, they just saw a trophy. When a judge ordered a criminal to be gibbeted, the law stated that they were denied a traditional burial. In the eyes of the church and the state, the individual's actions made them unworthy of resting in holy ground. By keeping the remains suspended in the air, the law symbolically kept them trapped between heaven and earth, fit for neither. Then in 1827, it all finally ended. There was no big ceremony, no announcement to the public. The land had been bought by a new owner who simply grew tired of thousands of rowdy tourists trespassing on his fields. He ordered the towering post to be cut down, and it finally fell to the earth. Decades later, in May 1867, a builder named Holroyd was digging. The workmen struck something solid. They uncovered the original 10-foot deep wooden framework embedded in the earth. The massive 10-foot wooden base oak stump were pulled out of the ground completely intact. Because 18th century timber was highly valued for building, parts of it were split up. Small sections of the dark oil-soaked oak were chopped into smaller fragments and distributed to the pub regulars and local history collectors as rare historical tokens. Meanwhile, the main chunk of the timber structure was cleaned off and put on public display inside the private gardens of the local inn. Moving Spence Broton's remains was a serious crime. When you look at the cold hard information supplied by history, we can officially start ruling out the impossible. For the final resting place of Spence Broton, first we must completely eliminate the grounds of Attercliffe Cemetery and the ruins of Christ Church. The story goes that the land around the newly opened 1826 church was a messy construction site with building extensions going on everywhere, meaning a fresh secret trench would blend in perfectly with the turned over dirt. The entire theory breaks down because of a massive timeline error. While the Grand Christchurch building did open its doors in 1826, later gone and turned into a quiet public green space, the actual Attercliffe Cemetery grounds behind it, where the original yard and the massive extension eventually merged, were not established or opened until 1859, when the crew actually needed a hiding spot in October 1827. The cemetery did not exist. There was no open burial ground, no building extensions happening on that land, and no workers turning over the dirt. The landowner Henry Sorby's crew couldn't blend a secret trench into a construction site that wouldn't even start for another 32 years. Another popular theory arguing that the remains were taken further out to Darnall. For nearly 2 centuries, a massive urban legend claimed that Henry Sorby's secret crew smuggled the box down the road to the quiet churchyard in Darnall to give him an unmarked resting place away from the public eye. It is a fantastic story, but under real historical investigation, it completely shatters. The entire Darnall theory breaks down because of a massive calendar error. The midnight removal operation happened in October 1827. The primary churchyard suspect in that area, Holy Trinity Church foundation, was laid in 1839, and the church doesn't exist today, as it was falling down. The Holy Trinity Church closed in 1975 and demolished. The modern building for the Church of Christ sits directly on the original footprint where the old Holy Trinity Church once stood. Henry Sorby's workforce couldn't secretly bury a skeleton in the grounds of a churchyard that wouldn't exist until years later. So while the myth of Darnall is deeply embedded in local folklore, the history tells us it is an absolute impossibility. With Christchurch and Darnall completely eliminated, it leaves us with what should be the absolute number one, most probable location for the secret burial: the perimeter of Hilltop Chapel Yard. Since 1629, this chapel was the only place of worship in the area before the massive 1826 project down the road. If you were transporting a skeleton through the pitch black night and needed to bury it as soon as possible, this older, quieter and overgrown yard offered the perfect cover of convenience. Because Broughton was legally barred from a standard burial, the most logical thing for them to do was to head for the absolute edges of the property, neglected corners right against the boundary walls. The theory goes they dug up a quick, nameless trench in the soil, put the bones in, and covered it up before the sun came up. For 36 years, Spence Broton was left out on Attercliffe Common, becoming a well-known local landmark. But in 1827, the landowner had the entire site cleared away, and that is where the real mystery begins. Decades later, workers dug up the old wooden foundations in the dirt, proving exactly where the monument once stood. But his remains were long gone. Over the years, the trail had been left entirely to local gossip, passed down through the generations with people whispering about secret midnight burials and hidden locations nearby. But what about the man himself? He completely vanished off the face of the earth, leaving everyone who goes past these spots today to look around and wonder, could he be right under their feet?